Hello, welcome to a new look kind of pirate radio style thing. I'm here, Jason Allen, Cadus is here, E-Police joining us. Cadus, why don't you tell us a little bit about why we're all sitting here in front of our computers talking to each other right now in this moment?
Okay, so obviously, you know, we used to do pirate radio like way back when. It was you, CX, me, and Greg Bushell, people like a long forgotten relic in the TF2 scene at this point. But we basically used to get together every so often and just talk shit about things that were going on in TF2. Since then, I guess Fully Charged came to be a thing where everyone kind of got a bit buttoned up and would sort of go over what happened in TF2, but I mean, over the years, it's sort of dried out. It barely happens anymore. When it does happen, it's sort of like 10 of us get together on Mumble. Maybe we get to say like 3 words per episode if you're lucky. And I don't know, it sort of ended up all being a bit like, I don't know, what's really the point at the end of the day? So, I don't know, it says pirate radio on the screen, but obviously it's not really. I just have absolutely no creative imagination when it comes to naming things. So I just was like, you know, I had like the graphics designed, and I was like, okay, I'll get a name to put on it, like just before we go live. Like, I'll think of a name. Didn't think of a name, so it was time to go live, and didn't have a name, so I just thought I'd call it Pirate Radio again. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, so that's pretty much the idea. I guess people probably know me. CX, a couple guys will remember you. E-Plead, do you want to sort of like let people know who you are? Because you're sort of you're the replacement for Greg, which is pretty big boots to fill, I guess. So yeah, do you want to just like throw your name out there for those that are maybe less familiar?
Basically, I am E-Plead, as previously discussed. Aspiring random high player, aspiring for mediocrity in everything I do. Done stuff with Hugs.tf, if anyone remembers those guys, and gonna happen again and all that. But I think my main value to this show is that I'm kind of like the Daily Mail, in that I have needlessly strong opinions about shit that no one cares about. And I
like
love gossip.
TF2.
Exactly. TF2 and like the most ridiculous, stupid ass gossip which we can find. Which is a lot, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like, people probably don't know you. Like, CX has been casting like top level games. I've been around the top level. You're sort of more of an unknown capacity, but I don't know. Like, obviously, I've known you for a long time behind the scenes, and I think, I don't know, even though maybe, you know, people don't know quite who you are in the same way they do us, I think you have, yeah, some very interesting opinions on some not very interesting topics because it's TF2. But yeah, having said that, like, I guess, yeah, let's sort of just go into it because, I mean, Rewind happened. That's sort of like the first thing on the agenda. It's a long time ago now, so we're just going to try and recall what we can of it, I guess. Yeah, like the tournament happened. CX, you were there, kind of. What do you remember from your like sort of?
So yeah, I kind of decided to go last minute because some of the Tezek guys were going. So I ended up not playing because they already had a team of 6, and even though they wanted to kick them both off, I wasn't actually that bothered about playing, and we couldn't find a 6th. So we were like, you know, let's not ruin these guys' hopes and dreams like a week before LAN. So I sort of balled up and just hung out for probably only the Saturday I was really there. Like the actual main tournament day.
Yeah, it's like I remember you weren't going to come, and then you were coming. I was like, whoa, CX is coming. But then it was like, I think I saw you for about a grand total of 30 seconds. You guys just sort of popped your head in. I legit, like, yeah, I don't even know what happened to you. But, yeah, so you saw, like, pretty much none of the tournament, right? You saw it all from, like, you were in, like, your hotel room for, like, half the event, as far as I recall.
No, we were out and about. The Friday, we came down to the event for, like, half an hour, so I could be interviewed for Dashin's thing. Then we came to the event, we got there pretty early, and then our game wasn't until, like, the afternoon, so we basically just passed out for a bit on the beanbags, played 2 games, and then fucked off. Went for a nap, and then went out.
Yeah. That's a shame, because it was actually a really sick tournament. Like, it was a really good setup for a LAN. It was something we've not really seen before in TF2. I mean, obviously, Froyo won in the end, which is kind of lame, because we'll always have a look back on this cool event and say that Banny won it. But, I don't know, yeah, like, it was cool, because, I mean, obviously, 7 boot camped there before the tournament, which is, like, a really new thing for TF2. The Australians always tried to boot camp before, and it was always just dreadful. But here we actually got like a proper setup. I mean, there was, apart from 60 Hz monitors, it was like pretty cool. Yeah, like Froyo won in the end, but
It was like a proper arena, which was nice.
Yeah.
Like, it felt less like you were just playing in like some abandoned warehouse, like every Insomnia feels like. It actually felt like it was designed for gaming.
yeah, I feel
Where
like
it was like, actually in a place specifically meant for like esports and those kind of tournaments. And
Yeah.
yeah, because I was really hoping you were going to come and do some production there, because like we were up in a studio. It was like really not really anything we've done in TF2 before.
Yeah, they asked me to, but I think I was quite drunk at the time, and I was refusing to take my sunglasses off, and they wouldn't let me go on with my sunglasses on.
Well, that's pathetic.
It was probably for the best in the grand scheme of things. I'm sort of glad I wasn't in front of camera.
Yeah. So, yeah, in terms of the tournament, like I say, we've been trying to do this podcast for like a month now. When I had the original idea, wrote the plan for the episode, I was thinking, right, yeah, rewind. That's something that's really in the forefront of everyone's memory. But it's been so long now, I honestly can say I don't remember a whole lot of how it all went down. Eeply, what was your perspective from the internet, watching online?
as a massive Twitch chat player, I watched every game religiously. And even preparing for this, I've watched a couple of VODs and stuff. Like, I don't know, I thought in general, the shape of a lot of the teams on land were, at least to begin with, like, looked pretty good. Like, in terms of the American teams, like, it's obviously so weird trying to kind of guess how the teams are going to be when they only ever play, like, within their own region. Like, I always hope that Jasmine T is going to go well, or the Aussies are going to do well, and I always kind of hope the Americans are going to blow dick because fuck the Americans. It's a general thing. But I think, I don't know, I think going into it, like, I saw a bit of the warm-up campy type of stuff, and I saw things from obviously friends which were there, and to begin with, I thought it looked pretty interesting for like the top 4 teams, like Meat Market and 20B. I hope 20B would like turn up and kind of be on form, but kind of whatever. But like going into it, it looked like it was going to be a pretty interesting tournament in terms of like, I think first and second was always going to be that 7-throw kind of thingy, but third and fourth a little bit more whatever.
Yeah, I've legit, like,
Open.
you just, like, sparked a memory in me. Like, this is how long it's been and how little I actually remember. Because, I mean, I sat through this entire 7 boot camp, and obviously we all know, like, in the end, they played, like, a good tournament and made the final. It was, like, a super close, sick final, like, you know, best of 5, went the whole way. Like, came down to the last 2 minutes of the 5th map. But in boot camp, they were actually fucking terrible. I completely forgot, like, how bad they were, like, in boot camp. They were getting their ass handed to them by the Australians, like, every day for, like, 3 days straight. I think they scrimmed EVL online, and I think they managed to play, like, okay against EVL online. But, I mean, in terms of the boot camp, it was looking, like, really fucking dire for a while. And, yeah, so it's actually weird how it all turned out, with 7 actually being competitive. And in the end, it was actually Jasmine T who, like, absolutely just blew shit. They had a complete meltdown. Whereas in boot camp, you know, they were looking like to break the 4th place curse or whatever. I
The thing is, all of that was like what I was hearing from obviously like wasn't there, but like knew a decent amount of people there. Like it seemed very much like kind of situation in which, in the build up to it, the Aussies were just like properly on form. Like it's obviously difficult to kind of guess why. Could be any amount of things. Might have been they were just able to, you know, they were a bit that kind of like shock factor. I suppose we'll kind of go into the teams a bit more in a minute, but maybe just the fact that Jasmine T going into it seemed like aggressive, always wanting to be doing something kind of team, and if you obviously get caught off guard by that kind of stuff, things can kind of go to pieces. And obviously 7 had their own kind of slight kind of problems in the fact that they were obviously playing with a different pocket and were trying to get used to all that kind of stuff. But that's it. To begin with, it did seem like 7 were looking basically pretty shitty, and Jasmine T were looking like they could actually like contest first place. I don't know. I didn't see much about Froyo or really EVR in the build up there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously because there was the boot camp, so the Americans sort of, at least from my perspective, like the Americans got kind of obscured, because obviously it was Jasmine T and 7 scrimming a lot before the event itself. Yeah, I mean, God, honestly, I guess for Jasmine, it was sort of like the Australians, I don't know, CX, like you'll recall, like they always kind of came in as the underdogs, like they would do their boot camp, play like absolute trash, like absolute like awful TF2, like completely incapable of competing, but they all sort of had this like bad setup and everything to fall back on. So they always came into the event as a real unknown quantity with a real underdog mentality. But I don't know, do you think maybe like expectation built up for Jasmine T in going into this event? Because that's something we've never really seen with Australian teams before. They always came in as like the outsider, like who maybe could stir the pot a little bit, but not really do anything. But here, I think they came in with some expectation and then couldn't really live up to it.
Yeah, like you said, every previous LAN, the Australians have always just sort of been this full-on wild card, like just a bit of a meme more than anything, just more of like an advertising thing that we can go, look, even fucking Australia are here. Whereas now, because they'd done well at the previous, was it I-58?
Yeah.
Like they did kind of well, even though again finishing fourth, but there were a bunch of other good teams. Now all of a sudden there's two other good teams and some random like second place teams, or like second to fourth place American teams. They're supposed to be locked in for this third place at least, and like a freeway head to head. But again, I didn't really see any of it. But what I was told was Zaka and Yui were just kind of shit.
Yeah, like I didn't.
Not to like broadly generalise for someone who didn't watch the game, but that's what I was told is Zaka and Yui kind of really let the side down flank-wise.
Yeah, I mean, I heard like a similar thing. I mean, I watched a game like of the Australians play, and I mean, like I said, I didn't see enough of the games to really just straight up murder anyone and say they were fucking terrible and they were the reason they lost. But I remember watching a game and it was like 15 minutes in and Zaka had 0 frags. I think that was one of their bracket games, like one of their very last games. I was like supposed to be on the desk, but it was sort of like 7 were playing at the same time and I was kind of meant to be on the desk and trying to coach 7 at the same time. So I would just sort of watch 7 and then look at the logs of Jasmine T and be like, okay, like on the desk, like talk some bullshit and say this is what I think happened. But when I was looking at the logs, Zaka had like 0 kills 15 minutes in. And I spoke to some guys, I don't actually remember who, because it was in the sort of after party where everyone was not really making any sense. Gio could barely move, I think, let alone speak. He was like kind of chasing homeless people around outside, and that's no exaggeration. He was like lost in some drunken daze, and this sort of like homeless Mexican woman came along, and he was trying to give her money, and he was like following her down the street. So that's the kind of level of explanation I was getting from them. But there was definitely an allusion toward the fact that Yui kind of went meltdown mode and not only underperformed but sort of gave up mentally. And I think he's supposed to be like the real like star carrier of the team, at least one of them, like alongside Poulsen. It's always been like Poulsen and Yui. They're like the big names. And I think when he sort of like gave up, it was just sort of like that was sort of it, I think, for them.
He did a similar thing at I-58. Like they did a sort of traditional Australian shit boot camp, pretty good on the first day, like surprisingly good. Looked like a real contender, and then they just drop off. And if I remember right, from I-58, like day 1 to day 2, it was Yui who dropped off the most.
Yeah. The thing is, I didn't follow the Australian story too much at I-58 either, because it was always just the way, because I've always been associated heavily with, like, it was Crowns at I-58 and it was 7 at Rewind. And the brackets never just aligned that I was paying any attention to that. I was always following the 7 story or the Crown story, and they'd never played. Like, they played in groups. I can't remember even what map they played in groups this time, but I mean, obviously, I remember the Crowns Jasmine game at I-58, which Jasmine T won under various circumstances. But like, what point was I trying to make? I can't actually remember. But yeah, like I've never actually, like the team I've been invested in at the event and been like actively working with has never played Jasmine in a best of 3. So I always feel like I have this limitation in what I've seen of them. Like I've never seen them kind of in their full stride. Because I mean, sure, they kind of slowly wound down at I-58 as well. But here, it was a complete and utter, like, miserable collapse, wasn't it? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, like, the group stage game, 7 and Jasmine T was on Viaduct anyway. So it was like 4-1, but it's also like, it's kind of Viaduct anyway. And especially like Viaduct early on the tournament can be a bit kind of iffy.
I think that's pretty significant, though, because Crowns, like, they slammed Crowns on Viaduct in group stages. Like, they had the same match, actually. It was like, because Crowns, 7's kind of the spiritual successor to Crowns. And at I-58, they kind of slam Crowns on Viaduct. And they get the same map in groups again at Rewind. And they get... I actually remember it now. They got pretty handily beaten, if memory serves. Like, that was kind of like... Because 7 had such a shit boot camp. I actually remember that map was pretty significant for 7. Because it was sort of like... It was a pretty big turning point. Because obviously they've been getting literally shit on by Jasmine T for 3 days. And then they were able to sort of dispatch them and, yeah, like, kind of conquer them. Like, I think
having a quick look over like the logs for like that game, it kind of more or less seems as you would expect. Like, it's this same story of kind of Jasmine as a general team were just kind of a bit in pieces. Like Paulson's up there, like putting damage, but in terms of literally the rest of them, Seven's just like better in every single way. In terms of every other kind of class. Like I went and rewatched in preparation for all this stuff. I watched their playoff games against Froyo and versus EVL. I didn't really bother too much with the Street Hoops one, although Street Hoops was kind of a little bit closer, but they were always going to be like a 5th, 6th team. And as a general thing, it just seemed like Jasmine had this mentality way too much of always wanting to kind of go and do things. They put a lot of faith in Paulson. They put a lot of like skills and a lot of trust in like Paulson to like hit his shit. But I don't know, it's difficult because like I only watched like a couple best of 3s, but there was a few times in which you'd see like real key moments in it, like key Ubers and that kind of shit. So much would go on to Paulson, and they just wouldn't be able to like finish up stuff. And like both EVL and Froyo would see this happening, and they would just play back, just waiting for like Jasmine T to basically trip over themselves.
Do you have do you have the logs somewhere for this? I thought it would be on this ComTF page, but I can't.
Yeah. If you go to the on any game, the little information thingy, and then there's a little logs link for each one, for each game. In the playoffs.
I was looking for exactly something like that, and I couldn't find it.
On the.
Oh yeah. I got it now.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like I don't remember this in as much detail as I would have liked. That's just sort of like the ramshackle nature of putting this show together. It happened way later than I would have hoped, and this information would have actually been fresh. But yeah, I mean, Jasmine T, like, to draw a line under it was like a horrendous disappointment, basically.
They were just in pieces, basically. Like every game, which I can remember seeing, they didn't have the DM to play that kind of way, and everyone, I know, maybe it's the fact that they obviously played a similar kind of thing at I-58, and maybe people just expected it a bit more from them. I don't know, just basically a total mess, the whole thing, really.
Didn't they have like no one good to play aside from forget the boot camp, like prior to the boot camp? Because before I-58 they had like mock immunity team, like that sort of bastardized last version of immunity with like Yuki and a couple of others to play against.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember what they were called, but they had like really close games with them with like the Oz League final. But then they don't have anyone this time, if I remember correctly. I think that's always been the problem for Australia, like more broadly. It's just they have no one to compete against, like at all.
Yeah, I think as well, this team coming in, like usually the least Australian team has. So I don't think they were that active coming in. Like I don't think they played the preceding season. I think when Seven came together and announced they were going to go to the event, Jasmine T were sort of roused out of hibernation. We're like, right, let's fucking travel across the world and play Team Fortress then, boys. So I don't think they were particularly well prepared. But I mean, I don't think it's worth really pointing to that though, because the bootcamp went so well for them. I really think something else happened. But I mean, yeah, like I found the logs now. And just to sort of go back to something I was saying before, Zaka managed six kills across the entire like series. As a best of 3 against EVL. It was the map where they actually got knocked out. Zaka got 6 frags across the entire thing. He got 1 on Process, and he got 5 on Gully. And those 5, like I said, Gully was the game where he went the first 15 without getting a kill. So it was literally like half a game, and then he got a frag.
Yeah.
And then he got a couple of frags when they already lost the game, and then got 1 on the next map. It's like, I don't want to call this one guy out, like really, like personally, but I mean, it just, when the Roma's getting no frags, I think it's really telling, because it's not just like, wow, fucking Zaka's really shit. Did I say Gio? If I meant to say Gio, I meant to say Zaka. It's not like, oh, Zaka's really shit, but it's like when the Roma's not getting kills, like, because when you're playing bad, normally like a Roma, you know, it's a messy game. Like, because you're playing bad, it gets messy. The Roma will get some random kills and random shit will go their way. It's just like absolutely nothing went their way. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe not dwell on Jasmine T too much, because they had a bit of a shocker. I think it was probably their last ride in TF2, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think we'll see a lineup quite like that again. I'm not sure what's even happening in Australia at the moment.
No idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's always the same with Australia. It's to the rest of the world, it's sort of an anonymous scene until there's talks of one of them coming to a LAN, and obviously the next one's not for a decent stretch. So yeah, let's just sort of leave Jasmine T before. So nice guys, you know. I don't want to.
No, that's it. Like going into it, like I was all for the Aussies, like doing good stuff, you know. Like in terms of them, like I think you could even argue like individually as players, I think they're like perfectly fine. It's just the team at the LAN just couldn't bring it together as much as everyone would have liked. But what are you gonna do, you know?
They play a really aggressive style, and if they've not been playing a lot, it's not going to work. Like it's a high risk style they play. So if you're not playing as much and you're not hitting as many shots,
exactly.
all these high risks become an even bigger risk because you're missing shots as well. But yeah.
Yeah, so working up from there, I mean, obviously next was EVL, like in terms of like the final standings, next was EVL. I saw a lot of their games against Seven. I didn't really see much else in them apart from Seven, but I feel like all of their definitive games kind of came against Seven because they were matched up in the upper bracket originally, and then they met in the losers finals. Like both series were 2-1, and both were kind of pretty nuts. Like, to be honest, I mean, like it's all kind of blurred in my memory now as like all like one like shitload of TF2.
The thing is, I remember the upper bracket, whatever bracket thing that is, the 2-1. It was only the third map, like Viaduct. That was one of the super close Seven Viaduct games where I remember watching it, and that game really, really could have gone like either way. Like it was another one of these games where Seven couldn't get like the cap where like they needed it. But in terms of like how both teams were playing, as much as Seven were making mistakes, EVL was still playing like way better than I'd expect them to against a team which is like as dominant in Europe as like Seven is. I kind of going into it, I thought EVL would be kind of not really able to contest anywhere near the same. I thought them Jasmine T would be like pretty equal, and saw from the games like that just wasn't anywhere near the case at all.
Yeah, like I wasn't really expecting this from EVL because I mean, Badonsky is sick. Basically, like Badonsky's always been a sick gamer. He's been to numerous events, like international, and I think he even goes back as far as when ESCA had top 4 lands at the end of every season. So I mean, like I knew they were quite good, but I like Yomps, Rando, and Badonsky were kind of like the names on that team that I could pick out and recognize. I mean, in the case of Rando, I wouldn't say he's particularly good, but he's a name that I've seen play TF2 for quite a long time. So it's like, you know, it's all very, very recognizable to the outside. But then you have people like Cookie Jake, Corsa, and Garbuglio coming in, and they're like way less like obviously going to be part of a good team, if you know what I mean. In the end, like I wouldn't turn my nose about any of them. I thought they all played very well, particularly Garbuglio. Previously like Purple Shirt, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was actually told that's Purple Shirt, I was like, actually I do know that guy. But even still, like I didn't have him like up here in the same caliber as like the rest of them. Like he played really well, and Corsa, generally one of those guys who's just considered, you know, like a sniper main who's shit at everything else. Like I know him best as the person who was on that one weird Froyotech team and then got removed. Like he had his class swapped like 3 times and then got booted by Banny. But yeah, like I was pretty impressed with him on the whole. I mean, like I don't know, like Rando's like a perpetual choker and kind of was always sort of been that way. I don't think he played particularly well in a lot of their games, but Garbuglio did like more than enough. I thought he was like really good. I wasn't really expecting it from them.
But I think it's like important to mention the fact that I thought Corsa and Yomps as a whole, they did so much for their team in so many situations. So many of like the kind of like fights that get a little bit scrappy or kind of like times where shit really needs to get done, they always seem to manage to do it. And I think it's important to note, as much as people take the piss, the fact that they managed to get that shit done when Rando's constantly on like shotgun.
Yeah.
It's legitimately something to mention. Like Rando plays that Rando style of pocket. You know, he hasn't changed in about 5 or 6 years. And yet Corsa and Yomp were still able to pound at that land. I think that's something which is like impressive in itself. And, you know, can't ignore that.
Yeah, I mean you're right what you say, like Rando's like legit like a dinosaur of TF2 at this point. He's kind of always been the same for me. Like I without going too far back. I mean, he's
what it reminds me of? Do you remember in the EU scene where Hox came back?
Yeah.
It might have even been on your team, Jason. And he was just like, he literally just looked like a fucking senior in a Premier League game or something. Like he looked so out of place.
Yeah, I think that actually was.
That's what Rando reminds me of. Except Rando's never taken a break.
He's never quit. He's just been here the whole time.
He's just been like refusing to retire kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he's always found himself on teams with like people like Badonsky and Shrugger or Badonsky and Yomps now.
It's been like Rando, Badonsky, Yomps. Like they've been this unit for probably about like 2 or 3, maybe even like 4 seasons now. Kind of swapped out Yomp like Shrugger, and they seem to be pretty happy playing with each other, which I I do just find it quite impressive, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like a training weight, you know.
Exactly. Oh, if they'd started playing pocket for them, they'd be pounding. Would have won the land. Woo. I think, like, you know, it's like an important thing to mention, and like, I thought, like, in general, just on the topic of like pockets running shotgun and stuff, there was more this land than we've seen in like previous ones recently.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting. Again, like rewatching some of the games, there wasn't, from a lot of those teams, there wasn't a great deal of like punish to it. Like the amount of mids watching like over the playoff games where Rando can jump forward, be spamming shotgun shots up like 80 health on a mid fight, and he like didn't get punished for that kind of play. It just seems a little bit off first, but
yeah, I mean,
there's
like looking at EVL, looking at their like time in this tournament, I really feel like they probably should have made the final. I mean, obviously, I was watching Seven, and I was always kind of perceiving everything from the Seven like bias, where like, you know, you always kind of see it like the team you want to win, when they should have won, and it's the other team that like were worse. But I mean, in the upper bracket game they played, what was it? They were up like, was it 3-0 or 3-1 on Viaduct?
I think it was 3-1 on Viaduct.
Yeah, they were up 3-1 on Viaduct, and I remember like we were talking, like we had like a tactical pause, and we were talking, and I don't know, it was me or someone else, but we were like, you know, this team has probably choked more than any other team I've ever seen choke before. So, you know, basically, come on guys, let's do it. And then, as if, you know, you snap your fingers and you ask and it happens, and they literally threw away a 3-1 lead on Viaduct, which sort of gifted Seven a route through the upper bracket. And then coming into the lower bracket game, I mean, granted, they didn't end up losing it, but they were up 3-0 on Gully, and literally Seven kind of said to ourselves exactly the same thing again. It's Rando and boys. They can choke like worse than anyone else in this game. And they choked away a 3-0 lead on Gully Wash. Like they managed to seal out the golden cap in the end for that one. But I mean, ultimately, I mean, in terms of how like they actually performed, you have to say like they'll obviously feel like super hard done by. I remember actually, I don't remember if it was after the upper bracket game or after they got eliminated, but I was in like the green room where all of the like the production and like the talent and the invite players were in there. It was just kind of their little private area to chill and be away from the noise of the rest of the event. And it was directly after the EVL game, and I was talking to someone sort of about what happened, and I was like, wow, you know, can you believe it? Seven did the comeback, and it must have been after the first game. I think, wow, Seven did the comeback, and like I didn't realize like Rando was across the room, and he just sort of like came like walking past, and like he just sort of like walked like directly into like whoosh. Like there was like these swivel chairs, and the chairs were just sort of like swiveling in his way because he just sort of like blasted through me, like shoulder barging, being a little bit exaggeratory there, but like, you know, literally like pounded through me. I don't know if it was like intentional or if he was just literally that mad that he had no idea people were there. Like I could never really tell. Was it like personal against me because I was like some Seven guy and he was pissed, or was it like just like he was actually pissed and just that unaware of his surroundings? But he was pissed, dude. Like I don't know how the rest of them felt. I didn't see the rest, but like Rando was pretty pissed. Like without.
You can see why. Like they said, like I remember watching the game. Like it was insanely close. So many rounds. Like so many rounds on that Vada game would just go to just a few seconds, like either side. And obviously after this like bit of a pause and stuff, like Seven managed to kind of keep like clinching it. But from EVL's point of view, that's got to be just like insane. That you can throw that kind of like lead, because obviously like as you know, it's got to be mentioned, it was obviously like first to four on this rule set for whatever reason was decided and stuff. So it's obviously got to be in your head that like if it was like the EU rule set, or I think does the SEA do first to four anyway? I assume so. Either way, if it was that first to three, it would have been over like, you know, it would have been over about 15 minutes in. They would have pounded.
Yeah. I didn't even really think about it in that way, actually. Yeah, if that had been like an I series, they would have just won Vita, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
They wouldn't have never even gone like the rest of the way.
It would have been like just 3-1 dominant performance, like, you know, off you go to whatever the winners, finals, whatever thing is.
It's interesting, actually, because for all of the sort of arguing that happened about the tournament format going in, I mean, I guess a lot of that wasn't really like privy to the public, but there was like a lot of like behind the scenes like discussion about like how to do like the format, because Banny wanted like, well, not Banny, but like mainly Banny, but like the Americans were sort of obviously backing him. Like they wanted like full American rules, like even though we had like literally 2 days to do more TF2 than we've ever fit into 2 days before, they wanted like the longest rule set there is out there. So we argued about that. We argued about the amount of rounds. Obviously, in the end, we ended up with 30 minutes. They wanted 45 as a compromise. And then it was like, obviously, the Europeans, like, Seven never really made a big deal out of it because they were just happy to have, like, a 30-minute time limit. But obviously, it was win limit 5, which is not something familiar to the Europeans. But essentially, the only part that wasn't really heavily fucking scrutinized going into the tournament was first to four on Viaduct. No one really gave a shit and was just like, okay, yeah, first to four is fine. Because, I mean, for my taste anyway, Viaduct probably should be first to four in Europe anyway. If you crunch the numbers, more often than not, a first to four on Viaduct takes about 30 minutes. If it's really, really close, it takes a little bit longer, but that's basically a golden cap. But nonetheless, point being, the only part that wasn't really heavily scrutinized was the Viaduct rules, and it turned out to be the only thing that actually made any fucking difference to the tournament. Like, for sure, that's like a massive change. Like, if it had been first to three, EVL would go through, I think. EVL goes through the upper bracket and everything is completely different. And for the rest of it, I don't really remember a game that went above 5 rounds. Or a game of import that hit the win limit and that was the end of the game. Don't actually remember it happening, so that's kind of an interesting, I don't know, an interesting bit of irony, I guess, about the tournament as a whole.
Yeah, well, like, obviously, when it was mentioned about this like, whole 45 minute kind of thing, obviously, if it had been 45 minutes, you would have had a lot more games ending at that, like, sudden 5 win kind of thing. But to me, like, obviously the way that the two, like, Europe and America does things is Europe, like, it's not so much a win limit kind of thing. It's playing to the specific 30 minutes, almost always. It's playing to the kind of time thingy, whereas America is, like, playing to that magic number. And I think, like, I don't know, when the whole rule set was, like, suggested, it kind of didn't matter so much at the time, because after a certain point in the American rule set, all you are doing is you're playing, like, to that number, really.
Yeah.
So I think that was the more important part of it. Like, obviously, from a planning point of view, I think if every game was 45 minutes, considering it was a best of 5 final as well, like, I think 45 minutes would have been just insane to organize. I actually can't believe it was really, like, suggested and kind of even, spent that much time thinking about it. It would have been such a monumental pain to, like, organize, and it would have thrown all kind of timings to shit. Everything would have been, like, dodgy times. Like, I'm glad it was 30 minutes. I can't believe 45 was, like, put in that seriously. But I don't know. I can kind of see why it was suggested as a compromise, because technically America can go to 60 minutes, but almost every American game will 20 minutes will go to, like, 3 wins, or even after half an hour get to 3 wins. But the whole point of the system is it's three round wins to get to halftime, and then you only really have 2 to, like, end it up. So I think, despite the fact it was kind of, like, claimed a bit to be a halfway measure, it was basically going to end up being the American rule set, because that's usually the length of time most American games last to, but without a break. And that's what I thought was, like, the biggest thing. Like, not having a break for 45 minutes of straight playing seems, to me, a bit kind of, like, much.
It's just a logistical nightmare as well. Like, I think part of the reason we've always gone with the European rule set for these international lands, I mean, partly it's on European soil anyway, so, yeah, but it's easier to schedule. Like, if the games are always half an hour, plus maybe a golden cap, whatever, it's so much easier to schedule than a game that could be half an hour, but it could be an hour. So if you play best of 3, that could be over, it could even be over in 15 minutes,